Hi everyone, and welcome to Educate Inform Challenge. My name is Teresa MacLennan. I am the Executive Director of the Women and Children's Shelter of Barrie. We are so thankful that you are here with us today. The goal of our program is to talk about the lives and experiences of women. We do talk about gender-based violence, women in positions of leadership and politics, and we talk about gender equity. And so we're just very thankful that you're coming along this journey with us. Before we begin today, we do want to recognize and thank our Indigenous community and partners. Thank you for allowing us to share in this space, on this land, to have these conversations. It is vitally important to us. We thank you for your partnership. So usually our viewers, you are used to me interviewing wonderful guests that we have here in our show. We're going to be doing things a little bit more different today. Actually, today I'm going to be interviewed by our Community Development Manager, Katie Taylor. And we're doing that because I wanted the opportunity to talk to our viewers today about a very sensitive and important topic, which is December the 6th. And we are going to dive into what that is, and we just really want to educate you about the importance of that date. Before we begin, I do just want to caution our viewers today. We are going to be talking about the murders of women due to violence. We want you to be very cautious, sensitive to your own wellness. If at any time that you are feeling triggered, that this is too difficult for you to continue listening to, please take a step back, be mindful of your own wellness, and just know that we're thinking about you. So there is no reason that you need to continue on listening to the conversation if it is becoming too difficult for you. So with having said that, we are going to continue. I'm going to hand over the interviewing, to my friend Katie Taylor, and we're going to start our dialogue today about December 6th. Hello, Katie.
Hello, Teresa.
Hi.
I just want to say thank you. It is truly an honor to be interviewing you today.
Well, thank you.
And to be talking about this extremely important topic of December 6th.
Thank you.
So this is something that our agency has participated in for many years. Can you talk to us about December 6th?
Of course. So December 6th is a National Day of Remembrance and Action on Violence Against Women. And like you said, we've been recognizing that date for many, many years, really since 1989. And so I'm going to talk to our viewers and let you know what happened in 1989. And many of you may know about that. December 6, 1989, in Montreal at Ecole Polytechnique, there was a group of women who were in a mechanical engineering class. So they're attending university, they're wanting to better their lives, they're educated women, and they're in school. On that day, a man walked into the school with a gun and a knife. He walked into the classroom where those engineering students were, and there was about 50 or so in that classroom. He came in and he separated the women from the men. There was 9 women and 50 men in that classroom. And, you know, not that this is the point of our conversation today, but that number ratio just shows how few women were actually involved in that program at the time. Significantly still, the majority were men. We're not going to talk about the murderer who walked into that classroom on that day. I will provide a little bit of backdrop to what his experience was, but that's not going to be our focus today. So to pick that back up, he walked into the classroom, he separated the women from the men, and he told the men to leave the classroom. So the only ones remaining in that mechanical engineering room were the female students. At one point he said to that group of women, "Do you know why I'm here?" And one woman said no. And he said, "I hate feminists. I hate what you're doing. You don't belong here. That's why I'm here." And the women frantically tried to explain, "We're just here to get an education. We want to better our lives. We're not outside. We don't hate men. None of those things. He said, I hate feminism and I hate you. And he started to fire. Of the 9 women that were in that classroom, 6 were murdered that day. The remaining 3 were seriously injured by the gunfire. He walked out of that classroom and he proceeded to walk through the hallways of the school, firing his rifle, shooting other women. He went into other classrooms, specifically looking for women to kill women. His target was women because they are women. That is the history that should be familiar to all of us. We should know that on December the 6th, 1989, 14 women were murdered by that person going into that school. What we also need to know is that 10 more women were also seriously injured and 4 men were injured. So that day is significant because we know that throughout history, women have been the primary target for gender-based violence. We know that. I have to ask myself the question, even today, what will it take for us to realize that that is still continuing? We know that women still are murdered every single day. We know that every 6 days in Canada, a woman is murdered by her intimate partner. What we know is that sometimes, year by year, that number can look like every 2.5 days. We have to have an understanding of our history. We have to have an understanding of that terrible event that happened on December the 6th, because that needs to motivate us about what do we do now. And so I share that information because we want to educate our community about that. The piece that I think I want to add before we might head into a break is that what we know about the shooter, and again, his name will not come from my lips. I will not provide a forum for that. But what we do know about him was that he had a suicide note in his coat pocket where he talked about his hatred for women. He was, as a child, he was physically and verbally abused by his father. He grew up in a home without a father's influence at some point. But what he knew growing up was his father telling him that women are less than. Women do not have a say. Women do not have the same importance. Women are supposed to be spoken to and not heard from. That young experience was ingrained in him, and it taught him about his views towards women, which translated into a complete hatred of feminists, or what his interpretation of feminist and feminism was. Unfortunately, we know that there's many children who are witnessing abuse. We know that there's so many women who are living in abuse. And what that does is that ingrains in them a perspective about women and men, the role of women and men. It ingrains in them a perspective about how we treat women, the value of women. And so December 6th really is, important for all of us to remember, reflect on, but also to talk about how do we use that history? How do we use the knowledge of what happened on that terrible day to motivate us into something different? And so for our viewers, we are going to be showing you the faces of those 14 women. And when we return from our break, we're going to dive more into December 6th and what does that mean to us today? How do we take that knowledge and that history and move it into action? And that is the key for our community, moving history into action. So I would just challenge you as you see the faces of these young women who were in their school, doing what they could to better themselves in their education. They had dreams and they had hopes. Please take this time to look at their faces and reflect on that experience. These were our daughters, our sisters, our mothers. They are the same age that I am now. If their lives were not taken, they would be the same age that I am. And so please take time just to look at their faces. And when we come back, we are going to dive back into this conversation. Thank you. Hi everyone, and welcome back again. My name is Teresa. I'm the Executive Director of the Women and Children's Shelter of Barrie. We are having a very sensitive conversation today about December 6th, which is our day of remembrance for women who have been murdered. We recognize that every year. And really the lead off to that is recognizing the Montreal massacre. 14 women who were killed as they attended engineering school. Again, we've sort of shifted roles today. Usually I'm interviewing our wonderful guests, but today I have the privilege of being interviewed by Katie Taylor, and so I'm going to throw it back to Katie, who's going to start to just get us back on track in terms of asking our questions so we can talk more. Again, please be very aware of your own wellness. If there's a conversation that is difficult for you, please take a step back. So Katie, I'm going to hand it back over to you.
Thanks, Teresa. So you did a great job of explaining to our viewers what December 6th is and why we recognize that. So can you talk to us a little bit about why are we still recognizing this day in 2021?
It's a great question because, you know, with lots of events that happen in history, some people may say, why do we have to keep on recognize that? Why do we have to keep on talking about that? And you know, maybe that would make sense if there weren't women still being murdered in this situation. We know that on average, every 6 days in Canada, a woman is killed by her intimate partner. And that's the numbers that we know. We know that that number is much greater, especially when we're talking about murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls. We know that there are thousands of Indigenous women who are missing, who've never been accounted for. So if we didn't have any of that, maybe it would be safe for us to say we don't need to continue on with December 6th. But we do need to, because we need to remember those 14 women who were murdered. And we know that there are still so many women and young girls who are being murdered today. So every year, December the 6th is a day of remembrance for our agency and the broader community. Every year we gather the pictures, the stories of women who we know of who've been murdered, and we recognize them. It is very much a somber, sad ceremony, but it is deserving of that. And we have to remember, and I use the language of murdered because those women have been murdered. We have to do that every year because more and more there are still women and young girls who are being murdered. And so we know that the backdrop to that is what happened at the Montreal massacre. We know that those women were killed because they were women, and we know that that is still continuing today.
So when our viewers learn about this day and that we hold a ceremony every year to remember the murdered women, what can they do to take part? You did mention, you touched on a few things, but what can our community do to take part in this remembrance?
Super. Great question, because we want our community to be involved, to be aware. Part of listening to this show is to learn more about the work that we do here. We always have a ceremony on December 6th. We always want our community to participate, to come out, but it's always a call to action. So what is your call to action? What can you do as a community member to try and prevent more women and young girls from being murdered? That is the question. How do we use the voices of women and men to take action? I've heard men say, you know what, I'm aware of the privilege that I've had. I'm aware of my previous behaviors where maybe I talked, derogatory about women. I'm in the locker room and we're sharing some nasty jokes about women. I'm going to stop doing that because I know that that perpetuates violence against women. I know that that perpetuates an oppression and a control over women. So that is really that call to action. We want people to participate in our Day of Remembrance. We want them to reflect on the women who died at Ecole Polytechnique in Montreal, but also recognize that every year there's more women who are killed.
You touched on something important when you said the word violence, and I think that might be important for our viewers to understand, what does violence mean?
Mm-hmm. Great question. Because, we get calls from women to our crisis line who talk about what they're experiencing, what they're living in, and they don't know it's abuse. They would not define that as abuse. We talk about, well, what is happening in your home? How are you needing to tiptoe around your own house? Women don't equate that to being violence, right? And we know that there is a progression of violence that happens in women's lives. It may start off with name-calling and derogatory marks, and then it leads to punches and strangling. We know that that's how that looks, right? Violence, abuse towards women is financial abuse, elder abuse, it's physical abuse, it's yelling, it's swearing, it's those name-calling, it's putting down in front of the children, it's all those things. I know that there is so much that we could talk about today. I really do just want to encourage our community to take part and really use their voice to talk about ending violence against women and how they can do that. And so the other piece that is just really, really important is that I really want to make sure that we are clear in saying that there has been no slowdown, no shortage of women needing our services here in the shelter. And if anything, if our community takes today from me saying that, is that violence and abuse of women is happening right here in our community. It is your neighbor, it is your coworker. There's no denying that. Our numbers don't lie in terms of the amount of women who are seeking out our services always. So where we're going to lead to now is we've talked about and we have absolutely shown our viewers the 14 women who were killed at the Montreal massacre. And we hope that that was helpful for you to really just reflect on their faces. And now what we're going to do is we're going to show you the women that we know of that were murdered leading up to November 2020. Every year we do this remembrance. We recognize these women who were murdered. And so we are going to show you the faces of those women. We're going to share a little bit of their story with you And again, this is a moment for you to realize and to see we have lost incredible women in our community, from our families, from our lives. Please take your time, reflect and read their stories, look at their faces, and just know that these are women that are no longer with us. Take care. We'll talk to you soon, and thank you.